We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip. When it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Lowe's knows how to help you save. This July 4th, get up to 40% off select Whirlpool kitchen appliances. Plus, get an additional 10% off when you buy 2 or 3 select major appliances. And when you buy 4 or more, you'll save an additional 20%. Find the right appliances and features that fit your kitchen's unique needs and style. Shop Whirlpool 4th of July deals at Lowe's. Valid through 7/9. See Lowe's.com for details. Savings vary based on purchase amount. Selection varies by location.
Hashtag no music, no intro. We are back. Saints Block Party Podcast coming at you with our friend Matt Waldman of RSP, the rookie scouting portfolio. Matt, we had Matt on last year. I think it was post-draft. And just before we even get to this, I don't even get into that. I just want to give Matt his flowers, talk about the rookie scouting portfolio, RSP. And I had decided that for this episode, which will go up next week. So this will go up next week. If you are a listener to this podcast, where you're listening on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, however you're listening, consuming this, if you interact with this, whether it be in the comments, if we're putting something on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, if you just comment something about this episode, we are going to do a raffle, and just a random raffle. Doesn't matter if you're a Patreon, non-Patreon. We're just gonna do a random raffle, and we're gonna give someone RSP. We're just gonna do randomly. Someone's gonna be gifted Matt Waldman's RSP, just engagement and just get people to read your excellent work. So I don't even want to get started with the Saints. I want to give Matt his flowers and first say thank you for coming on again, spending time with us this evening, talking about the Saints. But I want to just talk about, how was it for you this year, pre-draft, post-draft, your experience doing the rookie scouting portfolio?
Well, first of all, I appreciate it. And, thanks so much for you guys doing that and introducing some readers to the RSP. This is its 20th year. So you're 20, and it was a fun draft. It's very intriguing, this draft class, because I just study the skill players.
Right.
At least we facetiously should call that, because we know the linemen in the trenches are the real skill players. But yeah, I mean, the running backs was a rich class, but you knew they were going to get pushed down because just the nature of the NFL and the beast and how it is. Wide receiver was fascinating because I think for me, over the past several years, while last year was a great class, an all-timer possibly, and the year before was really strong, and even the year before that was pretty darn good, you realize, as we're getting into more 7-on-7 football, more private lesson coaches in high school and college, that these players coming into the league, they know about more technique and know about more concepts than they used to. But they're kind of like guys who go on the job site with like a tool belt filled with tools, brand new tools. They have a million tools for everything. And there's that old man out there who's been doing this for about 20, 25 years, who's kind of got a iffy back and a bum knee, and he's probably fallen off a ladder a couple of times, but he's still up there. And he probably knows how to use one tool in his belt better than that guy can figure out which 3 he could possibly use for that one job. And I think that what we're seeing with wide receiver is that there's a baseline of more skill, but that level to go from good college player to excellent NFL starter is still a canyon. And I think there's a little bit of, we're seeing people who are, there's more guys now that you go, well, in a year or two, it could happen. But now we've got to get better at differentiating between who's the Marquez Valdez-Scantling of, the league, who decent, but, every ball you throw, there might be a drop. You got to throw him 2 to get 1. He's kind of a BOGO kind of receiver in that sense. And then, him and Gabriel Davis are kind of like that.
Yeah.
And then somebody else who might develop by year 2, year 3, like a Robert Woods or somebody like that, who you start to look at and go, oh, okay, that guy's for real. And I think that's the interesting with that. Tight end's a fascinating class. There's people who, I'll just end it with that and just kind of, tight end's an interesting class from the sense that there's no Brock Bowers there, but you would think that people think Tyler Warren is like George Kittle and Brock Bowers combined.
Yes.
And I look at, and the guy who might surprise everyone is Harold Fannin, but who everybody was up then down on, but they don't realize that he literally had Sam Laporta's profile and skill sets to win one-on-one. Whereas, to me, Warren is kind of like a Michael Mayer, Kraft, Tucker Kraft combo. He can give you the zone looks. Right. He can win tight one-on-one, in terms of contested catches, but winning one-on-one like Kittle and then being that great athlete. I mean, Penn State, love him or hate him, one of the things they love to do is hype up their players. Mike Gesicki was the best athlete in the world, even though he's a high-cut dude who moves well when his feet are still. But when he has to move his feet, he's running in sand. So he's good in zone and boundary plays. Who's the other guy? Little Gronk, or what was they compared Freiermuth to Gronk.
Yes.
And Freiermuth's good, and he's going to be better with Rodgers probably, but he's not that kind of athlete.
Right.
And then, same with Johnson, and now with Warren. I mean, Warren's not going to be Taysom Hill, and you're even hearing things like that. So it's it's fascinating to see the hype that comes with this stuff every year, and also how people count data so much that they overlook the things that actually should be underpinning that data, which is techniques on film. Luther Burden Luther Burden III is a good example of a guy who the profile will tell you he's Wan'Dale Robinson or Mecole Hardman. The film will tell you that if you look at techniques that actually you don't need to see as many reps if the techniques are there in right combinations, because you don't exhibit techniques that good unless you've really been able to do them over and over without thinking. And he's got those skills. Ooh. So it's funny to see how we're seeing things where people count success rates and say, well, if we have enough sample rates, the data will include that. But if you don't have enough sample rates like Luther Burden, then the data doesn't show that necessarily. So those are kind of the fascinating things to me from this year that were kind of just quick highlights from a broad perspective.
It's funny that you with the RSP, you focus on the skill position. And, this was the first draft that me and Adam, we dove into early. We were diving deep into it, in November, because, the Saints were trash. They were losing every game. So we're look, let's go head first into the draft. And, once we started looking at it, we're man, there's some running backs in this draft, tight ends. Yeah, all kind of flavors of wide receivers. It's man, no way the Saints don't leave this draft without 3 or 4 juicy players, 2 running backs, wide receiver, tight end. Lo and behold, what happens? Saints have 9 picks and spend only 1 pick, the 6th round pick on Devin Neal. Nothing.
They drafted the tight end from UCLA.
And the UCLA tight end in the 7th round.
Yeah.
And it's that's it. So it's we don't even really have a lot of draft picks to talk about as far as skill position, which is funny. But they did take Tyler Shough in the 2nd round, at quarterback. I was curious, what was your kind of opinion on him from this draft going into it?
Oh, for sure. Shough's interesting because we're going to do the broad view and just say, all right, let's give the stylistic comparison to him.
Okay.
Just doesn't mean that somebody who sounds like Marvin Gaye is good as Marvin Gaye, but it's kind of the same thing with this. It's Tyler Shough, if everything works out and he has a great offense around him and he levels up fast, he's going to probably somewhere get to a point where he could leapfrog the good version of Jay Cutler and be somewhere between Cutler and Matthew Stafford. That's if like it all really works out. You're gonna need to see that there's something in him that people didn't see.
Right.
Now, I think where he is a good notch below Jay Cutler, good and bad Jay Cutler. So what that says to me is this is a guy who, by the grade I gave him, he could start right now if you limit what you're asking him to do in the offense. And there's going to be diminishing returns beyond that scope if defenses get to the point where they go, okay, this stuff's predictable. We know what you're going to try and do here. We're going to try and pin you into a corner and tell you to throw your way out of it and think your way out of it. And that's where the trouble's going to start for him, at least until he shows that he can make those next adjustments. So to me, he's got that niche of fans who are like, they love the under-the-radar player. He has speed as a runner. He's got the big arm. He's got that Jay Cutler ability to throw on the move. And I think if you squint hard enough, you see some of that Jay Cutler going on. But the problem is that managing football is the big part of quarterbacking. And so you've got to be good in the red zone. You got to be good in the black zone. When pressure arrives that you don't expect, there's a difference between blitz and pressure. Yeah. And when, the blitz is they send an extra man. Pressure is when they don't send anybody extra and the offense broke down. Okay. Right. And so when you look at Shough, he's one of those guys that, I watched him, when you watched him, he had troubles with pressure, especially blindside pressure and the blitz. Like his game imploded when he didn't expect that, whereas other guys who are really top-end prospects tend to manage that better. And just to give you an example, I've been studying this over the offseason with pro players. I looked at guys like Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Brock Purdy, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and then I looked at the three rookies, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Bo Nix. And what was interesting is that, against the blitz, most guys complete about somewhere between 55 to 60% of their passes. It's lower than their overall completion percentage. Some guys are even way better than that, like Joe Burrow looked like he was like
elite.
Yeah, elite. Brock Purdy was pretty dang good too. So, which was interesting. But
that's very interesting.
Very interesting.
Then with pressure, it's like below 50. Like most of the guys are below 50% with that range, and you would expect that. But if you're below 45%, something's gone wrong, and it's probably part of it's your offensive line. But Tyler Shough, when you watch him just at Texas Tech, he completed 42% of his passes against pressure, which is not a really strong number. He didn't have any touchdowns. He had 4 interceptions. So that was not great. When you look at
Ryan's face right now,
it's not great. He's got to get, it's kind of Kenny Pickett-esque in that sense that if he knows what's coming, he looks great. If it catches him by surprise, he just implodes. And so you're hoping that there's reasons for that so that he doesn't implode. Now, at the same time, you've got Spencer Rattler, and I will say I looked at his rates, and now it's, a little bit apples and oranges because we're looking at his rates in the NFL. Yeah. But his completion rate was 40%, and he had only 1 interception. So it wasn't much. It was a little worse, but again, still in that low-end range there. But, whereas like Jaden Daniels is at like 47%, even Caleb Williams with just such a messed up situation was at 45%. And then it was higher when Thomas Brown took over and just triaged the offense to make it legitimately, get rid of the stink that was basically Shane Waldron's concepts. So yeah, Shough gives you the arm. He gives the athletic ability. When the blitz is coming and he can see it, he finds answers. When the answers aren't readily apparent and he gets in trouble, he implodes. Managing the game in the black zone and the red zone takes a little too many risks, tries to play a little too much hero ball. Yeah. His accuracy can wane.
Yes.
Those are things these are common things with a lot of young guys. So he's in that area where you say, maybe, but the odds are against it.
And the interesting thing when you talk about Shough is that you say young but he's 26. But like in playing actual games, he is very young because he's only played like 2 actual seasons, even though he was in college for like 7 years. So like it's such a juxtaposition and contradiction when people talk about, and this is again, I think people when I want people to be sure when they listen to this, like I don't want people to like listen to this and think we're anti-Shough. Like no, we're not. Like he's drafted 40th overall, but what is very interesting to me, just as a person who loves football, who understands the game, with all those things that you talked about, you would think that you have Chris Olave, who one of his best traits is winning off the line of scrimmage, is getting open very quickly. Rashid Shaheed can do very similar things, and they have both those abilities. Brandon Cook's older, but all 3 of those receivers have injury concerns, issues that have plagued them. They have not, finished the season healthy. You would think at some point, with whether it's Rattler, whether it's Shough, going back to kind of Ryan's point, it's like, man, like a tight end, like a bigger receiver. And I do know this. Our sources told us this. They really wanted to draft Isaac Tesla at the 7th overall pick. Detroit got wind of that, jumped the Saints, drafted them before they could. So they were going to draft a bigger receiver, to maybe go up and get it. They weren't able to, and so they have one of the smallest receiver groups in the league. And so it'd be interesting to see if they add to that during training camp. They brought in Grave Davis for a visit. I know there was very, very, very lukewarm mutual interest between them and Keenan Allen. So who knows if that comes to pass. So it's just going to be very interesting to see whoever wins the quarterback competition, how Kellen Moore navigates that. But being that those are the worries and concerns when it comes to Tyler Shough, it does make sense why they went out and drafted a player like Kelvin Banks Jr. at 9 overall for left tackle. You move Trevor Penning to left guard. You'll see how that is, because you're trying to fortify the offensive line. So not saying that pressure is not going to be an issue, because every offensive line, no matter how good it is, it's going to. But like it minimizes the amount of pressure as much as possible throughout the game for the Saints going forward.
No, without a doubt. I mean, you certainly want to, with the issues they had with Trevor Penning the past couple of years and having so much hopes pinned on him and it not working out with your veteran quarterback, and a new system and everything in place. I mean, a couple of years ago, it seemed like the Saints were poised to take this division, like at least on paper. You look at it and go, on paper, you can look at it and go, okay, Derek Carr's never really had great protection. He's got an all-pro in Kamara. He's got these young receivers who are strong talents, who can really leverage the deep game. You're going to really get a chance to run Clint Kubiak's system with all that play action and the ground game and give that balance that allows Carr to see everything at the line, make the decision, and go from there. And week 1 against the Titans, they got exposed so badly early that they had to literally abandon ship with their game plans for the year, essentially, to help Penning double team.
Oh, was that the Arden Key game?
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. That was the Arden Key game. And I mean, it was and in contrast, what was crazy is you're watching Penning not be able to handle that. And then there's Tyjae Spears, the Tulane alum, who's being put in pass pros week 1 and killing it. By halftime, they're like, you know what? We don't even need to put Derrick Henry in here for that. We don't need to put in a veteran. We can let this guy handle it. And he's handling guys one-on-one in situations that you're like, this Tulane back is outperforming his role in pass. I know it's apples and oranges, but still, just to watch that and Trevor Penning needing an extra guy, and you're just like, oh my gosh, the Saints are ruined after a half because they have, unless Penning just gets incredibly better and there was an injury or something happened that could explain what was going on, but we found that wasn't the case. and that offense, I mean, they were hinged on their tackle doing his job, and he failed so dramatically that it was just a killer. So I think, yeah, they need a guy like that, and you would think, I guess they're counting on the idea that Devin Neal in the 6th round is a good value for them, and that he can develop into an all-around player who could eventually maybe take over for Kamara, or at least be a committee back with Kamara, with another back that they take earlier in the coming years. And then Matavao, I mean, I liked him more than most. I think he's got potential as a blocker. I think he's got soft hands. He can move pretty well for a big guy. But you would think he was a better blocker for the size that he is. Like, he's a little more finesse than I thought that dude would be when I saw him and watched how he played.
Right.
But
he's like 6'9" or something, just ridiculous. Like,
yeah, he moves better. Look, he moves better than Terrence Ferguson, who the Rams were all over. But he moves better than that, and he could develop into a nice contributor. But I don't think he has that special athletic ability. But he does move better than the workout warrior for the Rams, who people will be all over. But yeah, it's fascinating. It feels like they're hanging on one more year offensively with the veterans in place, hoping that the veterans can help level up the young quarterbacks in the room. And we should probably even talk a little bit about Hunter Deckers, just for the heck of it.
Oh,
the gambler?
Yeah, the gambler. I watched him. I didn't watch him from my book because he was the last player I went to look at before I was really going to finish writing up the quarterback chapter. And it was in March when I finally got a chance to see him from just old games, the Iowa games.
Right.
Iowa State games. And, listen, big arm, good athlete, he can move. He makes some throws that are starter level impressive, like in terms of just the ability as a thrower, like what Matt Stafford can do, fitting it into those tight creases, and you go, wow, that was a heck of a throw. But the decision making is like the Hyde to his Jekyll, and it's like, so he's really got to show a lot more maturity with how he reads the field. But I think all your quarterbacks except for one probably need that. Like they're all like, they all either don't manipulate the field as well as they should, or they've got gaps. Like, it's odd to me that Spencer Rattler, from when I watched him, was better against zone than he was against man-to-man.
Right.
It was strange. But Baker Mayfield was kind of that way, too, when he came out, and they went to, similar program. They went to same program, and there's a little bit of that left over there. So maybe that's just being used to the scheme that you're in. But he was a little better at that. So that's kind of strange. You want to see him progress better against man, manipulate better, go from there. You look at Shough, the same thing. It's like he doesn't hold defenders as long as he should. When there's certain things that he should have recognition of post snap. And then Deckers, the same thing to an even greater degree. He's like, I would say Deckers has maybe as much upside as Shough, but a much lower floor. And Shough has maybe a floor that you're going to feel like you're tortured as a Saints fan if they hang on to him like they hung on to Daniel Jones in New York. But he has this high on the ceiling for you guys to work out, So it's like, I know you don't want that, but I mean, I'm just saying it's what I see. I could be wrong, but we'll see how that goes. And then you got Haener, who we've talked about last time, who doesn't have that athletic talent as an arm talent, but there's some things there with his game that are fascinating if he could somehow earn enough reps. But in an NFL where they value the big body, the big arm, and the athletic ability, ain't going to happen.
Yeah. And the funny thing with Jake Haener is he's like been an excellent practice player. Like, he always turns heads at practice, just functions well, but when he has gotten chances to get in games, it's like, what is going on here? It just hadn't shown up, whereas Rattler, when literally thrown into the fire, it wasn't perfect, but you kind of saw something, you know what I'm saying? And Rattler's so fascinating because, like, when I pull all these, like, advanced statistics and stuff, he's horrible in all of them. Like, his statistics are horrible from last year. But I just can't shake what I saw with my own eyes because I know what he was playing with. He was playing with the third preseason game. He was playing with that type of roster against playoff teams. Like, literally no starting wide receivers, no starting offensive linemen, no starting running backs. And he has to play, like, playoff teams with this. And, like, as a rookie, And so just some of the glimpses I saw that he showed, was positive. Like, does that mean he was going to turn out to be a really good quarterback? I have no idea, but he did show glimpses. And it's kind of hard to disassociate the statistics that we look at versus, like, what I actually saw with my own eyes,
No, I think it's great analysis, and it's true. I mean, you look at, in your division, you look at Bryce Young, and I remember coming on the show after the first month of last season, and they were like, "What do you think?" I said, "He's a good player. He's just not comfortable right now." Mm-hmm. But if they're benching him and they intend to bring him back, which is what they said, that's a good sign because this kid has the skills. And when he came back and what he did to Steve Spagnuolo's defense in that near win against Kansas City, and moving forward, he was fantastic. He looked everything like the player that they thought they were drafting
when they drafted
2 years ago. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So
you could actually see, like, the switch. It was amazing to see, like, this is what we've been looking for. Like, I mean,
started against the Saints. Shout out Dennis Allen.
But I mean, it's like musical performance. Quarterback is a stage performance craft because there's all, and it's like music because there's all this theory in terms of, like, you could talk about music in terms of theory, in terms of notes and chords and rhythm. And,
gotta go play it.
Everything like that, and that's fine. And when you're an improviser, certainly that's very helpful, especially when you get into different mediums of improvisation. But at the same time, like you said, Adam, it's like you got to hear it. You got to hear the music. If you can't hear it, it doesn't matter how much theory you know.
Right.
Yeah. But if you can hear it, if you can hear it, you could be. And I hate to use this example, but it doesn't. We're compartmentalizing the player. Brett Favre didn't know any theory about football until about the second year, but he could hear the music.
Right.
And and when he screwed up, he had enough onstage ability to mask the screw-ups enough or to limit them in a way that he could continue playing through them, and you forgot about him. Or if you did remember him, you were just that nitpicky person who people hate to listen to music with. Because you're not enjoying the moment and you're breaking it down too much. When at the end of the day, you're like, wow, that was amazing, even with this or that. When somebody goes, oh, well, he really meant to do this. He meant to play this over the A7 chord. Okay, I don't care. It still sounded good. That's where maybe Rattler is. Maybe Rattler's at a point, just like Bryce Young, where, with Bryce, and opposite to Bryce Young. With Bryce Young, he came onto the stage and he froze. He overthought. He was trying too hard, and he wasn't playing with the music, and he overthought. And everything was a slow reaction, a step late. He was stiff. He just didn't seem like he was in the flow because it's a flow state. Athletic ability, athletic endeavors are flow state. You play as if it's instinctive, but it's really learned information and practice to the point of instinct. But it's not quite as instinctual as people think. Right. And I think that Young had to learn, for whatever reason, he was one of those guys that had to relax a little bit and go, okay, I know how to play this game. Stop thinking so much. And I think that happened for him. Whereas maybe with Rattler, maybe it's he's leading with the feel, and you see the moments of the feel, But now he's got to go, I got to go back in the offseason, and I got to start translating the things they're showing me to what's going on here. We'll see if he can do that. And with Shough, it's kind of I think that's where it's like things pop out, and he's like, oh, no. So it's, a good example is a guy brought up, Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy, I asked a couple of musicians. There's a guy I met about 2 years ago at a festival through a friend of mine. He plays with the band Los Lobos. And they were football fans, and I played the saxophone, so I'm a music fan. So we were like at Washington Park, New York, playing speed chess with the clock, where it's like we agreed we're going to take turns. 5 minutes of football stuff, 5 minutes of music stuff, and we're like, So we were at one point we talked about Purdy, and we were talking about him as a performer, and they said, well, the way you describe Purdy and why he leveled up so fast, because the talent was there, but maybe with another team it wouldn't have been good, makes total sense, because if you're a musician and you get to play with seasoned pros, like guys you'd see down in New Orleans who've been playing for years and years, and you play with a rhythm section from New Orleans, and you're a young kid who's just getting started, but you've got good skills, but you just haven't had a lot of performance experience. If you don't have to overthink your role or overthink other people's roles, because you're used to playing with kids who are like, yeah, he's pretty good, but I know that he's going to get behind the beat here. I know that when we play this type of a rhythm, he loses a beat, or this happens, or the piano player gets too busy and then it screws everybody up. And these things happen that people don't always notice. But when you're the 49ers with their equivalent of a veteran rhythm section, you're not having to worry about what the wide receiver's doing or what the tackle's doing or have to overcompensate anything. You just do your thing and it flows. And now because you've had that expectation that things are going to be the way they're supposed to be and you just do your job, now you're getting all this positive reinforcement that's coming faster and you're not overthinking. But when you're on the Saints when you're on the Saints or another team where you're worried about the tackle, or you're Caleb Williams and your whole offensive line is trash, and you're getting sacked 54% of the time against blitzes, which is unheard of, because they're asking him to drop 5 and 7 steps on the plays where they actually told him how deep the drops should be, because they weren't always matching drops with the routes. Can you believe that? They actually didn't tell him on a lot of install plays, just get back there in time to throw this. So he's having to figure that out. Has no veteran in the quarterback room to talk with him, watch film with him. Nothing like that. And they have no offensive line, and they're giving him deep drops. Yeah, that's gonna. I don't care whether you're Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams. You're not going to avoid that at all. And that's the thing. Now you start overthinking. Yep. Because you're trying to do what somebody else's job, and this is what happens in the NFL too much. So the risk for the Saints is we need to get Kelvin Banks in here because we know that we need to have a guy who can do his job, so our quarterback can do his job. We've got receivers who are going to be where they're supposed to be. They may be older, but for right now, the fire isn't there. The fire is in the offensive line, especially the tackle position. We're moving Penning inside. He'll be better at guard, we hope, and then that will put us in a position where we can stabilize things and give a figurehead of our offense a chance to learn, and maybe he'll level up fast enough that we've got a future with him.
And one of the most interesting things is to see how the season plays out because of the quarterback class. And I'm not usually like let's look at the quarterback class next year, because we reported it on the podcast, and then Adam Schefter, I think he reported it draft night or a couple of nights later, that the Saints did try to trade up for Cam Ward, and we reported that months before the draft. So they desperately wanted to trade up for Cam Ward. if the Saints season does not have, the Saints don't have a good season this upcoming season, they win 3, 4, 5 games, they're going to have a decision on their hands if they're picking top 5 with the next batch of quarterbacks in next year's draft. Even with them taking Shough last year or this past draft at 40, because you're not going to, you're not in a situation like that where you're drafting very highly and you still potentially need to add a new quarterback. When do you typically start that process of looking at guys?
For me, it's, probably within the next 2 weeks, I'll be watching players.
Oh, wow.
So, and I've usually watched players from the year before, or watch players who will be available the following year, the year before. That just naturally happens because sometimes there's guys who you think might come out and they don't.
Then they don't, right?
So now with quarterback, I am notoriously known for waiting late, because I like to have a cleared schedule. So because I chart so much with quarterbacks, it's kind of ridiculous. Like, I have literally over 100 criteria points of what I grade that are defined. And then in addition to that, I chart accuracy based on whether it's what I define as pinpoint, what I define as generally accurate, but that means the receiver had to work at it outside what the route or the coverage would demand him to work at. So say, for instance, Michael Thomas getting thrown a back shoulder play on a seam route or on a crossing route facing a defender who's heading towards his break, Drew Brees hitting him, behind his back shoulder, that's a pinpoint pass because the route concept demanded that.
Right.
But, if you're running a seam and you're throwing the ball to the wrong shoulder and the receiver has to make an adjustment, that's a general accurate. So I have NFL Next Gen stats that I look at that give me averages for what the NFL expects on certain types of depths of passes and passes versus pressure. And then I chart whether it was accurate, pinpoint or generally accurate, and whether the placement and the velocity were good for multiple ranges of the field. It literally looks like I'm looking at a maze on my Excel checklist where I grade all this, so that I give you an idea of, and while it's a small sample size, it still gives you an idea, because I look at 8 to 10 games of these players most of the time. And I'll watch more, but I grade only that many.
Gotcha.
And so I'll look at that, and I'll look at the grades and see what the NFL standard is. But that takes a lot of time, so it can take me all day to go through 2 games of a quarterback. And, so I'll start watching some mid-season and work my way through. But there's a month where literally I'm working probably a good 16, 18 hours a day, and it's just devoted to quarterbacks. And I'm only watching 18 to 20 at most.
You doing all that watching some Hunter Deckers?
Yeah, that's why.
Buy the RSP. People don't buy the RSP.
Yeah, please.
That's why.
Please.
And if you think it's overkill, I'll just put it to you this way. I'm bragging, but it's a plug for why you guys have me on. Is that I've done consulting for quarterback coaches, guys who work with these guys in the off season, pre-draft, like Anthony Richardson and Caleb Williams and Brock Purdy, the coach for all of them. The first guy I worked with him was with Brock Purdy. And from grading this stuff, I had a write-up back in December that I gave him an early preview scouting report and showed some plays where I said, these are some plays that I think for Brock, he was thinking this is what happened, and he decided to do A instead of B or whatever. And I had about a dozen plays as examples of things that I wanted to show him extra. And about 3 months later, it was around March, I guess, probably, I asked Will Hewlett, the quarterback coach for these guys, and he's been in this industry for a long time, worked with a ton of folks. And he said to me, I said, how'd it go? And he goes, it went great. He said, Brock's a very interesting guy. He one of the things he did that nobody ever said to me before was, listen, just in our introductory interview, he said, listen, I want you to don't spare my feelings about anything. Tell me exactly what I need to know, and you can be as blunt as you need to be, because I know where I'm getting drafted, if I'm getting drafted at all. That's why I hired you, because I know that you've got a reputation for being that guy who helps guys who probably have the skills to get drafted, but don't have the stats and the profile to necessarily easily be drafted. And so you're going to help me there, and I just want to get better overall. So I'm not going to get better if you don't show me. So they went through tape, and he had the notes that I had and had prepared them for his own thing to watch tape with them. And he said, Matt, he goes, there were a number of plays that he said out loud what he was thinking that was verbatim to what you wrote down.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was like, and he said it was eerie. So, I'm not going to get them all right. Certainly not. I mean, this is a tough industry to do. Quarterback's the toughest sport. But, but I do all this stuff because it helps people who are doing their thing.
Let me ask you, just going back at, some of the charting and scouting that you've done with the quarterbacks, how has it kind of turned out, as far as the results of where you had guys sort of graded, as prospects to 2-3 years down the line in the NFL?
Sure.
How do you think it's adding up?
I think it's been very good so far. It's what I've become known for, in a lot of ways. We can go back to Jared Goff. When people were talking about Jared Goff as a top prospect, and then the Saints the Rams camp were like, well, he's got such a long way to go. We're worried about where he's going to be. And now Sean McVay's come in and basically calling the plays for him in the headset and making changes, and he might as well just be howdy doody with strings to Sean McVay. But I had him graded as a top prospect of those quarterbacks over Carson Wentz, and I explained a lot about that with why pocket presence, ability to throw accurately. And when he went to the Lions were, when they traded for him, they were like, listen, we threw everything at him right away because we wanted to know whether this was just an add-in to the trade we got with Stafford and we're going to look elsewhere, or can this guy legit be what we need him to be? And we were a little surprised at how good he was and how he handled everything we threw at him and more. Lamar Jackson, everyone said he was, well, not everyone, but a lot of people who people consider everyone said he was not even a quarterback. I thought he was the best pocket passer in that class, and I thought that people were characterizing him the way that they should have been characterizing Josh Allen, and that Josh Allen was the guy that they were characterizing that they should have characterized Lamar Jackson to be. And if you look at Lamar Jackson's production, you would see that he's a fantastic pocket player. But it took, 5 years and Peyton Manning on Monday Night Football to say he's a good pocket passer for people to believe it in the mass media. Patrick Mahomes, you can go read my Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes at Matt Waldman, RSP.com. You can read those scouting reports. I've had people literally say Patrick Mahomes' scouting report that I wrote was literally like I predicted the future.
Him right there too. Him right there too.
And that's I literally got an email from someone who was working at LSU's. He was LSU's team manager during the Joe Burrow years. Joe Burrow year, a fantastic year. Yeah. And he wrote me from the combine a long overdue thank you, saying that it helped what I do on YouTube videos showing people the game helped him learn enough that he was the first guy LSU ever hired who didn't play football to be in the role that he's in.
Oh, wow.
And that he was reminded to me at the combine because two guys he overheard were talking about me and giving me my flowers, I guess. And he reminded him to thank me about, what he got. I said, do you mind telling me who the two guys were? He said, yeah, they were a couple of Chiefs scouts. And one of them said this was Matt Mahomes' first year as a starter. And one said, if I ever meet him, I'm giving him a hug. So those are guys that are good examples. Certainly, who else would be on that list? Guys that I identified that I felt like would struggle: Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ritter, Malik Willis. And while I think Malik has done a good job getting on the path towards a rehab with his career, certainly guys like that were there. Who would be other examples of players that? I mean, those are ones that like literally. Bo Nix. I had Bo Nix. I thought he was the third best quarterback in this class and the safest one to start this year, other than Caleb Williams. And I said that about Caleb. I said Caleb's going to a disaster, but he'll survive it. And it may not look good year one, but he'll be the only quarterback I think that could survive that craziness that he's about to go to. And Bo Nix, to me, I said, was better than what people thought. And you're going to see a guy who manages the game really well. And he's gonna be a guy that Auburn did him no favors.
None.
And he was better than just the system quarterback people talked about it at Auburn. Baker Mayfield, I said, this is a guy who could be a good quarterback, but he's going to need a few years, and he's going to be like a Pro Bowl Jeff Garcia. Surround him with great talent.
That's a great
That's a real good one.
And he's going to be really good. But if you're going to ask him to carry your team in the playoffs in the pivotal moments, he's that guy you got to worry about. And Cleveland Browns, which was my team growing up, I told the Cleveland Browns network this after year one, after their excitement, and I was like, listen, I hope I'm wrong, but this is someone who's probably going to get you help with his team, help you get to the deep into the playoffs, and then when they really need him to make those 2 to 3 plays per game that make a difference, he's not going to make them. And that team's going to feel like they stalled out inside the 5 of their season.
I guess my question is, has Baker Mayfield changed?
He's climbing better in the pocket. I will say that. The game that really like solidified what he was like as a college athlete was the Georgia game at the Rose Bowl, where in the first half he was ripping apart Georgia, who was playing zone. Okay? And then Georgia said, you know what? We're going to rush the pocket on either side and get the edges really high and make him climb against man-to-man coverage and make him throw on time against man. He couldn't throw on time. He might have completed passes, but these were passes that you projected the NFL, didn't throw on time, and he fell apart in the second half of that game. And that was his problem for much of his time in the NFL, is that he would not climb. He would back away from pressure or try and get outside the pocket. You have to climb. Joe Burrow, another, obviously good name there. But, he's climbing more. And that's making a difference because now because Kyler Murray's a great example of a guy who...
Build a polished wardrobe that shows you stay you wherever you go with Mack Weldon. Use code MAC25 for 25% off your first order of $125 or more at MackWeldon.com.
I probably pick on more than anybody in this industry.
Back door.
Yes. Kyler Murray can climb a pocket. He most of the time refuses
not to,
and he can't make efficient plays because of that. He's making guys reroute. He's opened himself up to pressure where there was none. And now he makes all these great highlight plays. Like, you probably pick 10 to 15 highlight plays he makes in the season. But you know how many times he's supported more than 2 top 24 statistical producing receivers and or tight ends in the same season? Once in 7 years.
Ooh.
Once. He has not supported only one guy. So he's ended up he distributes it a lot in checkdowns, or runs a lot, or he's only leaning on one guy. Trey McBride was that one guy. Marvin Harrison Jr. was ranked 37th or 38th among receivers, and when you look at it from those types of yardage things, from say you can use fantasy football as an example, but that's an example of a guy who, if he played more efficiently, he'd have quicker answers. and it wouldn't. But he's playing hero ball. It's like he's like I this is an old reference, and Wolf, I ain't saying you're old, but you got a little more gray in your beard like me, or not like me, but you're getting there. But I remember Adrian Dantley, the forward in the NBA, who was in the 70s and 80s. He was an unbelievable scorer. But the joke was that he was a black hole. You put the ball into his hands, and it wasn't coming back out.
Wasn't passing.
And sometimes to the detriment of the team. And I think that Kyler Murray is like the Adrian Dantley of the NFL.
Oof. That's funny.
The last one that I had, I know we spoke a lot about like the Saints offense. Thoughts of Brandon Staley coming back after his time, Chargers head coach that didn't work out, spent that year in San Francisco, but not like defensively. I think he spent it on the offensive side of the ball, but he's trying to build his name back up and rehab his image, being the defensive coordinator for the Saints. Doesn't have maybe a ton to work with on the defensive side of the ball, so it may be an uphill climb, but because I know the offense is like the key, but like to me, if this team is going to be any sense of like decent, like that defense can't regress any more than it did last season.
Yeah, that's for sure. And this is also a team that's kind of hanging on with their veterans, and you've got some good veterans, and you're hoping that can happen. Certainly, you can look in the back end and say Tyrann Mathieu can give you certain things and certain looks that are nice. Alontae Taylor's got some skills that are fun to see. Pete Warner certainly, in mid-career form, but he's that guy that might be the one player you're looking at that's going, we need like 4 more players of his skill level at his age to be like feeling really good about this defense. Because otherwise you got Demario Davis, who's old, but like what he does well, but he's still pretty old. Young's hoping to rebound and be the guy they thought he would be, and then of course you got the stalwart Cam Jordan. So this is a team that has a lot of holes that they could fill, on that end. But to Staley's, when we look at Staley, it's always interesting that the NFL hires guys to be something that they are not yet or have not yet proven. It's the idea is, well, if you're a good coordinator, that makes you a good head coach.
Right.
But good coordinators don't have to delegate nearly like head coaches do.
Completely different jobs.
Yeah. They don't have to be front-facing to the media on a regular basis. They don't have to deal with players in the way that they have to in the role of a head coach. They don't have to deal with GMs, and they don't have to deal with owners. And those are 2 big headaches right there if they're micromanaging executives, which you look in corporate America or any job, when you have a micromanaging boss or boss's boss who micromanages over your boss and is just like nitpicking things that don't matter, but they're the boss, so they want you to do something that's completely insanely stupid, and it's going to completely take away from your day of getting the things done that your boss wants you to do. That's fun, and look at Cleveland. That kind of thing tends to happen. The owners want things to make a splash. So Staley doesn't have to deal with that anymore.
Right.
So he can get back to doing what he does best, what made him a coaching candidate in the first place. So, sometimes that's a really good thing. Yeah. And so maybe he can take the lessons that he learned and be a better coach in how he deals with people and how he deals with players and what he needs to do with scheme, because he understands the bigger picture maybe a little bit more, so that he can help find solutions for his coaches who are in the middle of that kind of political stuff.
Last one I got for you. I'm going to name a couple of the running backs that the Saints have, because they have how many, Adam? 7 running backs right now?
7 not named AK.
7 not named Alvin Kamara. So we like one of the questions is like who is going to be running back 2? Because they got a bunch of guys, but so you got Kendre Miller, who's been talented guy, but rarely on the field, hasn't really been a professional inside the building. You got Devin Neal, who they drafted in the 6th round. You got Marcus Yarns. You got who else? We got Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Cam Akers, who they just signed.
Cam Akers, Vallis Jones.
Yeah.
Vallis Jones,
Xavier
Valladay.
Yeah.
A person who we just learned about. Like, I'm like, who is this guy? Who is Xavier? And he's been, shining at minicamp for whatever that means. So do you have any thoughts of those names that I just mentioned? Like,
absolutely. I'll give you quick hitters on all these guys. Let's start with Vallis Jones, because the joke is there's a popular podcast with the Bears that I was on draft day when that came on, and they have me on as a frequent guest, and they go, and I said, well, if you like guys who drop the ball a lot, who can only really play, punt returner, but you're going to draft him like he's an early round receiver, then great, you've got your guy.
Vallis Jones was a few players, like when they signed him, I had to look up, and all I saw was like lowlights on YouTube. Like I never saw a guy with so many lowlights.
Vallis is what you'd call a gadget player. When people, he's one of those guys that if you can get the ball in his hands in space, he might do great work for you. But those are schemed up plays that you can only have a handful of them in every game. So how much volume and reliability are you really going to get out of that, if it even works? So yeah, we're going to say he's a special teams guy at best. And if they like his speed and athletic ability, then who you're talking to in the Saints room might be overvaluing certain traits out of guys at running back. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, local hero in a sense. I always looked at him. Obviously a good route runner, good pass catcher. In his prime, very quick. You wonder with the PTSD that he was going through, with some of the things off the field and the injuries that he had, you wonder how much he's really had left. So can he be a role player maybe on the team in certain situations? Yeah, but you're hoping that you got other guys who can do that, because you don't want to pay the vet minimum probably for a guy who's going to give you that limited type of thing. Marcus Yarns, I really liked out of Delaware. But he's interesting because I thought, well, at worst, if he couldn't gain the weight, because he was listed like around the 170s range when I saw him, you're looking at him and going, maybe he's more of a Deshaun Jackson archetype type of player who can play, be a big play option, really good after the catch, good pass catcher over the middle. But now you see him at 190 and you go, okay, that gets kind of interesting. That he can stay as a running back. He had good decision making. He has good feet. Maybe a little bit of an Eric Metcalf type of guy. DK's uncle. In the sense who played with the Browns and whose dad Terry played with the St. Louis Cardinals. Like he's quick. He's one of those guys that you hope you can sneak onto the practice squad. And he could be your Vallis Jones and Clyde Edwards-Helaire combined with some promise as a runner, if he can translate quickly to the things they ask of him in the summer. Xavier Valladay's out of Arizona State, and he's bounced around a number of teams. Right. I liked him coming out. He's a really good pass receiver. He's quick. He has skills to be able to work between the tackles. He has a good feel for running the football in tight spaces. He's got good acceleration. He's just not a big dude. Everyone likes the running backs who are over 215 to be a bell cow, and they want unbelievable speedsters if they're under 210. He's neither. So he's a shifty, smart player who's just good enough to make rosters or practice squads, but because he doesn't have what I joke is the athletic cleavage to get the attention of NFL owners and GMs and decision makers. I know.
Tuned in.
Yep, exactly. They don't get too tuned in. So that's the problem. But he's a good player. So if he's making noise in training camp, or in camp right now. That's nice. In games, you're going to need to see him break off some big plays to convince coaches that go, so that they can make the classic phrase they did of Terrell Davis. He's faster than he's timed. You know, he's
right.
Which is basically mean that he's really tuned in and on top of everything. So there's that. Cam Akers is the Vikings. The Vikings took him in after Sean McVay and him had their outs. After that season, he came back from the Achilles and looked fantastic in the second half of the season. Looked like the guy who was supposed to be out at Florida State. And then he just literally lost his job in the first half of the game where Sean, and probably whatever was going on behind that, where McVay was like, I prefer Kyron Williams. And they stuck with Kyron Williams, and Akers wound up in Minnesota. Minnesota used him as a reserve, and he could contribute and play reasonably well. They liked what he did, and they liked him. Went to Houston, and then they traded him back to Minnesota.
Right.
So, he can catch. He is a powerful runner. If the Achilles is healthy enough that he can not just look good at the beginning of the season, but continue to play at a high level of athletic ability after taking a beating. Because sometimes after a major injury like that, after a lot of rest, you play well. But as trainers have talked with me about, sometimes, after the baseball bat's been taken to your leg multiple times in several weeks, you don't recover as fast after those injuries. So that's the issue with him. But they're using him as a hedge for Neal and Miller. I think that's what's going on. Is they're like, if we got to get somebody to be behind Kamara, we can roll with Akers a little bit. We know what we got there. Neal's that guy that smart runner with what he does, catches the ball well, decent size, decent burst, gliding kind of runner. But you wonder, like, he ran a lot of gap plays at Kansas. Like, it's all
tons.
Like toss, pitch, outside, and occasionally saw him inside. And I think he can develop into a good inside runner, but you saw a lot on the outside there with him. So he might need a year for you to really feel comfortable with him, but we'll see. With running backs, coaches even tell you, we don't really know until we get them into game tape situations because in practice, it's totally different. Miller, like you said, Wolf, listen, unbelievably talented, smooth, great bend, good acceleration, can catch the ball, power, contact balance. He should be one of the best young backs in the league right now. And this is what happens sometimes, is guys come in, and I don't know the whole story. You guys probably know way more than I do, but my guess would be is he's like some guys who thought they made it because they're getting paid now, and they didn't have to work unbelievably hard in college to do what they did because they were that top 1%. And when they face guys who were equal to them, maybe, there's only one or two guys like that developed to that point every year in a game that they faced. And if they got shown up a little bit here and there, they still put up great stats, so it didn't matter. But now they're on a team where the defensive tackles, who are like 330 pounds, are just as quick as he is in the first 5 yards. And suddenly now you got to work harder. You got to be on point with your assignments. Blocking actually matters. You can't dip your head all the time. You can't clap attack certain passes and drop one and go, oop, on me. You can't do that enough. And if they don't think you're putting in the work and you're making careless mistakes in practice, or you're making careless mistakes in games, or you're not conditioned well and you're getting hurt in things that they think that you need to be conditioned for, and you're looking I'm just laughing. I've watched Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is my favorite player, and probably the one player that I look at that I love, and I missed on him because I look at him and I was like, he fumbled so much. He carried the ball like a loaf of bread at 2 stops. He bounced everything outside all the time. And then I heard the story that in his first year, Sean Payton just yelled at him for bouncing things outside. Said apparently to somebody, I don't know whether this was in the media or not, but to a beat writer I knew, told a beat writer, listen, I didn't like that we drafted Alvin Kamara. I mean, I may have told people, how I felt, but I didn't think he was a smart runner. I thought he bounced everything out too far outside. And so the scouting report, my scouting report matched what Peyton said, but he said I yelled at him and I got into his grill about what he wasn't doing right, and from that point on, he was a different player. Not because Peyton did anything, but because Kamara heard that and was able to go, okay, you want me to run inside? He thought Kamara was scared to run inside. That was what he told the guy. Yeah. And then you watch Kamara, and you would never think from his rookie year on that he was ever scared to run inside. He's so good, but that's the thing. Kendre Miller should look at what Alvin Kamara does to work out and go, if that guy is doing that guy, somebody needs to tell him if they haven't. Alvin Kamara was as talented as you were, but he didn't understand how he was supposed to play the game. And when someone told him, he listened. And then not only did he listen, but he said, what else can I do so that nobody ever has to say anything to me again about how I play, other than maybe something cushioned in a nice way of saying, this is how we'd like you to work this play, as opposed to, why aren't you ready? You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Perfectly said. And, everything's in front of Kendre for that running back 2 spot. A lot of his issues has just been, you hit on it, the professionalism of just taking care of his body in the offseason. And, he's a professional football player. You can't not work out in the offseason and then show up to training camp and just be able to think everything. Because in theory, right, we talked, kind of just going back to the beginning, and as we tie this up, ideally, I think Kellen Moore would like to have a running game of AK and Kendre Miller. So whoever the quarterback is, Rattler, I know Mickey Loomis, and probably to some degree, probably Kellen, but for sure Mickey Loomis wants Shough to be starting week 1. They drafted him 40th overall. They want him to be in there week 1. So what's the easiest way to alleviate a lot of pressure for any quarterback, but especially a rookie quarterback? Lean heavily in the run game. You drafted, you have this new O-line that should be, in theory, good. Lean on that run game with AK, lean on that run game with Kendre Miller, and then when you have to throw, not on third down, but when there's an opportunity for when there's any throw, then Shough would throw, and you can squint and see okay, this is how this would make sense, right? So we're not putting Shough in situations where he has to go out there and throw 25 to 30 plus times a game because that's not a strong suit, blah blah blah. But in theory, for that to work, AK can't be he's getting up there in age. He was drafted in 2017. It can't be all on him. So it all has to go hand in hand. So in theory, Kendre Miller to be that running back 2 that can alleviate that load from him would go a long way to in their main plan. But
listen,
we'll see.
I would make a joke. I'll make this joke, and I love Dante Pettis coming out of school, but I didn't.
Me too. I did too.
What I didn't know that he was like Kendre Miller in terms of how he approached the game, and I don't know if maybe it's not the exact same characterization, but I would say maybe Dante Pettis is one of those guys that when people say they don't love the game the way they need to become the way they should, there's some truth to that. Sometimes people say that, scouts say that about Arian Foster, and really the reason they said it was because he was a philosophy major, which is dumb. All right, but when Kyle Shanahan says in year 2, Dante Pettis has the talent to be one of the absolute best receivers in the NFL, and here we are, Dante Pettis and Kendre Miller better not be next to each other in the locker room.
Oh boy.
If you want, and I love what Dante Pettis could do, but if
I did too, I loved it. Was it Washington, right? Washington,
yes,
yeah, loved him as a prospect.
Yeah, like a Brandon Lloyd-esque type of winner of the ball who had certain type of route game that was patient and sudden, great after the catch. But he had work to do to get off press. He had work to do to be where he was supposed to be. He had work to do to play all three positions. Kyle Shanahan was putting you in a position to be an all-pro, and you didn't want it. And listen, I understand, but yeah.
Just a little trivia factoid, just to bring it full circle with the whole AK thing. The Saints traded a future second-round pick in 2018 to get that second third-round pick from San Francisco that year to draft AK to get. So they had 2 third-round picks in 2017. So they had to trade to get that. So that second-round pick that they traded to San Francisco in 2018 was used to draft Dante Pettis, just to close out.
Wow, fascinating. Fascinating. Yeah,
I don't know. I'm a sicko for knowing that in my head. But I
love it. But that's fantastic. Yeah, I hate saying that too, because God, and he seems like an engaging guy too. And
super, like,
you gotta remember,
yes,
like these guys, a lot of these guys, they're really good guys, and there's nothing wrong with that. And listen, if you're happy being a reserve, making a good bit of money, where you don't have to play a lot, well, if it helps your team on some level, that's great. But it's just. When you're someone who watches someone, what they could be if they really wanted to be. Right. It's a different story.
You go over and you watch the route Pettis runs Week 17 against the Bucks that he scored a touchdown against, that Rattler threw to him. Like, it's just like, do more of that. Do that. It's like a fantastic route. Fantastic route. So I get exactly what you mean. Matt, this has been outstanding. Again, if you listen to this entire podcast, but if you didn't, I said at the beginning, I'll say it now. Matt Waldman, RSP. You can follow Matt on Twitter at Matt Waldman. So if you engagement, so whether it be on Twitter, it could be Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, however you want to just leave a comment of just adding a comment. Positive comment. Let me add that. I don't want any positive comment in regards to this episode. You don't have to be a Patreon. It could just be anyone, and then we'll compile all the comments, everyone who has left a comment, and then we're just gonna do a raffle, and then whoever wins the raffle, we're gonna gift them a copy of the post-draft RSP. So get some more readers for Matt and his great content and all the work that he does. Appreciate you coming on, man. It was a pleasure. Definitely appreciate it, and can't wait to have you on again.
It's always a pleasure. I appreciate you guys having me on. I've always looked forward to being able to do this show. And if you get negative comments, I can say this. I've always joked with people that the first step to becoming a lifetime RSP subscriber is to call me an idiot. That's usually what people said when I had Nick Chubb over Saquon Barkley, early in his career.
No, I remember disagreeing with you when you Brandon Cooks, actually, the Brandon Cooks draft 2014. I'm like, and you pointed out some particular things like why he wouldn't be like a number one wide receiver, quote unquote. You spot on. Like I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. Sure. You spot on, man. Like, it's a good player, but just never became that guy.
I'm glad he's back. His career's come full circle too. So I think that's kind of cool, and he can definitely help them.
No question.
Matt, thank you for coming on. Appreciate y'all. Please like, subscribe. We appreciate y'all. Be safe out there. With that, we are out.
Peace.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Nicole Byer, helping you make those rooms flyer. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild! Like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Ooh, fierce! This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
This is your before and after story. Instead of imagining a rewarding career in medical imaging, Southeastern College can actually take you there. Prepare for a career in ultrasound, radiology, and X-ray technology. With hands-on specialized training, simulations, and real-life experience with the latest imaging technology, you'll be ready to play a vital role on any healthcare team. Transform your life by helping others. Southeastern College. Your future is bright. Visit scc.edu to get started.